Hello and welcome to Against the Storm Update 1.4, the Fishing Update, and the Keepers of the Stone DLC. As many of you correctly surmised, either because of, it's coming out today, or because I made a post about it, we are going to start a new series on Against the Storm using the Fishing Update 1.4 and also the Keepers of the Stone DLC content. So this episode is episode 0, I guess, in the series, and we're going to talk about the patch notes, kind of similar to what we used to do in the old days with having a episode of patch note discussion, and that which released sometime ahead of the first episode, and then have the first episode coming out in the usual premiere time slot. So we're going to do that again, and we're going to talk about these patch notes, and then we're going to jump into the game in the following episode, which will probably release. This will probably be releasing an hour or two before that. So, but I want to do this in a different way than the way it's listed here. Of course, there's an overview telling us about the update 1.4, but we know about that because, well, that's today. But the Keepers of the Stone DLC is listed first before the fishing update, and I think I want to do that in the opposite order. I want to talk about the stuff that everybody's going to get in the base game as part of this release today, and then we'll talk about what's in the Keepers of the Stone that is different than what is in the because this is a paid DLC rather than what's in the base update. And as we were told to expect, there is a small amount of content in this patch, in this content change, and that was sarcasm. So of course it's called the fishing update, and so the first major new content item is fishing. So fishing is kind of a combination of a blend between the traditional or the typical gathering type buildings, your stone cutters, your gatherers type of things, your trapper, in that you have to set it up next to a node and they go to the node to collect it. However, it's also very similar to something more akin to farming, in that you go to the node and you collect the stuff, you work the stuff, but you have to work at it a long time. And only after an amount of work of gathering all the materials from the node, in this case a pond, do you get to actually claim those materials and be able to use them in your base. Now, you have some choices you can make, but that's essentially it. So that comes with a fishing hut, the small fishing hut, basically similar to the other camps. The small one is an essential building. The regular one is acquired via blueprint, trader, wildcard, etc. Blueprint in either case, but from any of those, the blueprint choice, the trader, or the wildcard. And fishing huts collect resources from ponds. Similar to regular resource nodes, there are two sizes of ponds, 2x2 and 3x3, and there are 3 different types of ponds. An algae pond, which gives you algae and a small chance of herbs, or medium chance of herbs. A large pond gives 2 algae and a 50% chance, a slightly larger chance for herbs, as well as a chance for fish. Thunderfish is a common species of eel that gives us fish and scales, and then the larger one, of course, more fish, more scales. Copperfin trout is a fish, and the Copperfin trout pond gives scales with a chance for sea marrow, and then more scales, more sea marrow, and a chance for fish. So the fishermen, as I was saying, don't collect resources like regular gatherers. They're gonna catch the fish and algae in nets, and only when the entire pond is depleted will they deliver that stuff to the warehouse. Now, you cannot use the materials until they've been delivered to the warehouse. Now, you do have a button, that's this button here, this reference here, but that allows you to collect the resources more immediately, but it depletes the pond immediately, too. So, if you press that button, and they're not done collecting from the pond, whatever you've collected from the pond is all you're getting from that pond. The pond is gone. Which is kind of an interesting mechanic, and I'm glad they've added a different type of gathering mechanic because it gives you a little bit of variety in your game, and it's kind of an interesting choice to make. Do I want the instant gratification of a small amount of things right now to not see any more for potentially a while, or do I want a lot more later? So maybe in the early game you make one choice, in the later game you make another choice. Maybe you have a order or something, timed order or something that you need to complete right away, or a glade event, and you need to get that stuff. So you go get that stuff, and you sacrifice the larger return for the smaller immediate return. There's also a item that can be made directly in the fishing hut, called ground bait. And ground bait is used to double fishing yields. It's made from packs of crops, and packs of crops equals, it says 4 pieces of bait, but I'm almost positive I saw the number 5 when I was watching the live stream yesterday, as you're potentially seeing this. And yes, they create the bait and blah, blah, blah. And then you can decide how you want them to fish. Either they will never use bait, they can use bait when it's available, or they will only fish when there's bait. So you can also decide how much extra materials you want based on the bait availability. So in addition, or expanding on that, they're talking about all the new resources in the game, and 3 of them are directly acquired from fishing in ponds, and 2 of them are made from, at least in part, fishing in ponds. So we have fish, and fish can be used basically everywhere meat can be used, or most places meat can be used, in addition to this new resource called paste, which is down here. Scales are more like leather, in that they can be used to making water skins. They can also be, and also another new resource, boots. Dye, which is the renamed pigment, and then also incense, so you can, I guess, burn the scales to make incense, and then, or crush them maybe to make it doesn't matter. And you can also make copper bars from incense, because if you recall, this is called a copper fin trout. So the scales are actually made from copper, and you can turn those scales into copper bars, which helps the whole metal crafting, especially in biomes where you don't get any metal, which actually I might actually have to confirm that a little bit later in the patch notes, because there might still be a situation in the Royal Woodlands where you may or may not be able to get this. Algae is the 3rd new resource obtained from the ponds, and it can be used in places, I guess, where you would use like plant fiber and stuff like that before in a lot of ways. Coal being an exception to that, and the crystallized dew also being an exception to that, I think. But then you can make it into flour, fabric, leather, and meat can be fed to the creatures in the ranch. So paste is a smooth paste with no chewing required. So if you were a frog who didn't have teeth, maybe that would be something useful to you. Humans and lizards both like it as well as the frogs. It's produced in a few different buildings, and we'll see where all the recipes have been rearranged later on. In these patch notes, because there's been a lot of rearrangement of recipes to include these new resources, as well as to make them maybe match the building style a little bit more. And ingredients in paste are dye, and then eggs, fish, or meat. So once again, you kind of see that fish and meat are kind of congruent with each other. Boots are a new luxury resource, I guess you would call it. Similar to, and we'll see this in a little bit, similar to coats. And in fact, they are a need-based resource, like coats and like food and, like prepared food and housing and things like that. And so certain species, these 4, all like boots. Some of them also like coats, some of them just like boots. But yes. Producing a cobbler, which is a new building. And also the leatherworker, tool shop, and weaver. Ingredients are either leather or scales, which also, again, water skins will also be also leather and scales ingredients for those. So, or for that. All new resources have also been added to other existing elements of the game. So there's new orders. Or tweaks to orders to include these new resources. The traders obviously will buy and sell them, and the glade events, etc. The level cap in the Smoldering City has been increased to level 20, and there are 2 new rewards for the upgrade tree in the Smoldering City. Here's those rewards. I'm not going to read them out, but you can read them here on the screen. Oh, by the way, I hope this is good. I hope you guys like that I'm actually showing the patch notes on the screen. I know I didn't do that in the past. I wanted to actually particularly do that this time. There are also, notably, 2 additional upgrades in the DLC, which we'll talk about later, which is a total of 4 new upgrades in the Smoldering City. The new buildings, the small fishing hut, of course, the fishing hut, which can only get from the 3x3 ponds, or This one can't get from 3x3 pounds. This one can get from both. And then, of course, the Cobbler as a new building has 3-star boots, 2-star luxury goods, and 1-star dye. Clearance water and a tailoring specialization. Clearance water for the boosting. New cornerstones and perks. I'm not going to read these all through. I just want to show them here on the screen, and you all can pause the video and take a look at them if you'd like. But all kind of themed around fishing, which kind of makes some sense because that's the fishing update. New orders as well. Again, the same kind of thing. All kind of themed around the fishing or things related to fishing, like, for example, coal, which is kind of, related now that algae can be used to make coal. Same thing with... It's kind of interesting, though. It's kind of competing. Oh, hey, lumps of coal has been added, but you can use algae to make coal, but you can also still mine coal, and this actually gives you a boosted that, and the same thing with the copper in this one, which is kind of interesting. New forest mysteries. These ones are all kind of themed around, I think, again, this type of thing. Well, I guess more about the weather than anything else, but I guess everything is about the weather in this game, isn't it? New node, new leather node to some biomes. Water strider mold. This chitinous exoskeleton left behind by juvenile water strider. So you can get leather from it. You can get additional leather from the large node, and there's meat chance from both nodes. And then it's harvested by a harvester's camp, which makes logical sense, since I use the word harvest. And it can be found in the Marshland, Scarlet Orchard, and Cursed Royal Woodland, so about half of the biomes here. New needs, paste and boots. We talked about those, and of course these are needs that are similar to the other needs. Paste is one of the food needs, boots are one of the new category of clothing needs alongside coats, whereas the existing need that was clothing is now just called coats, which we'll see, I think, later also. 2 new fishing-themed unique glades, one forbidden, one small. Okay. A new haunted ruin, the Haunted Guild House, becomes a Holy Guild House and rebuilt. New dialogue to Lori in the Smoldering City. New passive effects to all needs. Resolve system. Needs have a passive bonus to the resolve as well. Complex food, services, and clothing. Housing has no additional effect. So just because you stick them in a house doesn't mean anything. You have to actually do one of the ones that require something. Complex food. Each satisfied need of this category increases a villager's production speed by 10%. Services. Each satisfied need of this category increases a villager's chance of producing double yields by 5%. And coats grants an additional +3 to resolve during the storm. Boots grant an additional 15% movement speed increase. And they adjusted the description of needs and goods according to these changes. 2 new deeds, here they are, which are kind of more along the lines of kind of endurance ones, like ones you would get over the courses of playing a lot of different towns. A new decoration, Big Catch. It's a 1x1 green decoration, completed by the Taking the Bait deed. And then 4 new ghost encounters in the Cursed Royal Woodlands, probably with, well, maybe not with frogs, but maybe with frogs. No idea. We can find out at some point. Remove the rainwater specialization from foxes. They now have a Blightrot comfort specialization that is only active when a building has at least 1 Blightrot cyst on it. So this really nerfs the foxes in a way. I mean, if you have the Blightrot cysts on the building they happen to be working in, that's great, but there's no control over where the cysts appear. So how do you know where to put the foxes to work at ahead of time? Kind of an interesting thing. I mean, you can use more rainwater in that building, which would trigger the cyst to appear on that building more frequently. But still, the rainwater, though, has been moved to the frogs, which we'll see when we look at the other half of the patch notes. Or, well, it's less than half. This is way more than half. Recipe for coats has been changed. It requires dye or resin, dye being the new pigment, but again, you can use the scales in the, I think it was in the dye. Fabric has been changed to leather. So you have to use leather now instead of fabric for coats. But the recipe is a lot faster than before, and so they've adjusted the pricing to reflect the change in ingredients. Although it is interesting that it's leather, because that's complicating. I didn't read that clearly before, and now I'm reading it again and I'm seeing what it actually means. Requirements change for 2 forest mysteries. So instead of 2 services, Eclipse requires 1 service, 1 clothing. Alluring Lights needs 1 service, 1 clothing, 1 complex food instead of 2 services. Higher difficulty costs so it'll appear with weaker negative effects or stronger positive effects to offset its harshness. Well, thank you for that at least. Training gear can also be made with leather. Skewers now requires 1 less insect meat, mushroom, blah, 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 in all tiers. Fabric can no longer be produced with leather. Algae took its place. Okay, so that's a substitution there. And then leather in the ranch can no longer be produced with plant fiber. Algae has taken that place. Pigment's been renamed to dye, as we talked about earlier. And then here's the thing about the clothing need. The current clothing need has been changed to coats. Clothing is a category with coats and boots in it. Samely how complex food and services works. Species needs have been all reshuffled. And this is, of course, to make room for the frogs, as well as to include the new ingredients that we have here of paste and boots, as you can see. Conveniently, since they don't have a page yet in the wiki, this, by the way, is the Hooded Horse wiki that I'm reading these patch notes from. So there's no active page for these yet, so it kind of also helps to highlight the fact that those are the new things in the thing. A whole host, as I mentioned earlier, of recipe moves. And I'm not going to read through all these either, but you can see them all here on the screen. So I'll let you pause the video if you'd like to read through them. But a whole host of things to make things make more sense and or to squeeze in the boots and paste. Also, service buildings have had a shuffling as well, and I'm not going to read through those either, but a whole host of changes there with the needs and effects that are available in those buildings. Several buildings are locked behind which species you get in the town. Tinctuary and Scribe, you have to have beavers in your town in order to get those. Leatherworker, you have to have lizards. Cooperage and Artisan, you have to have harpies. And Apothecary, you have to have harpies. And the Forum requires you to have frogs in your town in order for that building to appear in your blueprint pool. So, kind of an interesting effect of having different species and different things having priority and availability. A few specialization reworks. Masonry is a new specialization tag associated with frogs, so if you don't have the DLC, you will not be able to take advantage of that, especially note in these 2 buildings, the clay pit and the brickyard, which are now both masonry, and there's no longer rainwater. But then again, rainwater is a frog bonus anyways, so you won't so you wouldn't get that bonus from the foxes. All of these buildings here no longer have the rainwater specialization, so there's no specialization for frogs or for foxes in those, unless the other fox one is in those. Rainpunk Foundry, warmth has been removed. Bathhouse, rainwater's been added. And the Forum has the brewing tag removed. So there's a bunch of changes in that area. Whole host of orders changes. Again, I will let you pause if you would like to read through those. But there's just, all kinds of orders changed. We're just going to read everything carefully as we play through again. Level up rewards have all been reshuffled. Frogs and Frog House have been added at level 13, assuming you have the DLC, of course, and everything that has the little frog logo is associated with the DLC. I presume the pantry here is that specifically, and the cobbler is available to everybody, but everything with the little frog logo must be DLC related only. Even though the forum's already been in the game, now that it's locked behind frogs, if you know the DLC, then presumably you will never see the forum. And then, of course, they push everything up to level 20, so you can have... They've been able to rearrange some things and move things around. Smoldering City upgrades, also a reshuffling of the upgrades tree a little bit. Not so much, but they did squeeze in a couple of new Brass Forge entries here, which I don't know how this works if you don't have the DLC. So, if you are playing the 1.4 patch without the DLC, I'd like to know what this one and this one look like. For you. I don't know if they're grayed out or if they're just skipped or how that works. So let me know how that works for you in the comments or chat or come to Discord even. And then new resources. So the Royal Woodlands adds scales as a new resource. Scarlet Orchard adds fish and leather, Coral Forest scales, marshlands, algae and leather, Cursed Royal Woodlands fish and leather, and Sealed Forest scales and algae. So you can see all those new things there, as we talked about quite a bit earlier. And then a whole host of miscellaneous changes. Generation rates of different types of resources. Stone in the marshlands is now a slightly different variation, kind of similar to the way the eggs work. Where you have the two different types of eggs that give eggs, but one gives meat and one gives leather. Now there's a stone deposit called an overgrown stone deposit in the marshlands that has a 30% chance for algae. It's a secondary, as opposed to roots from the regular stone, which is kind of interesting that they've added that to a little bit of variety there. Slightly increase the number of glades that can spawn a rainwater geyser, and then they've rebalanced the way that the geysers spawn in the different types of glades to the point where they're basically all even in danger glades, and then some of them are higher in forbidden, some of them are higher in small, which is really good. Increase the buy and sell price of coal and copper, which is probably good also because copper was kind of devalued in the past. And they've also limited the number of trading posts per map to 1. There's never, to my knowledge, ever been a real good reason to have more than 1. If there was, well, you can't have it anymore. But I don't think it made them come faster. I don't think it did anything for you, so there was no real point in it. So that's fine. Rename the camps building category to resource gathering. That genericizes it from just being camps to include the fishing and the other ones that aren't really called camps, I guess. The building categories for multiple buildings to better reflect their role in recipes. So you can see those. Mine moved to the resource gathering. That makes sense. Grain collectors all moved to both moved to resource gathering. Apothecary is now in food production. Brick oven's been moved out of food into industry, which I think that's because they pulled the food recipe out of that. And they also, down here, switched it to clearance water, whereas the apothecary now is a drizzle water. And the furnace is now a drizzle water instead of a storm water. Furnace is food production. Grain mill is food production. So they've moved some categories around too. So I'll have to find those buildings when I do this. Master Blueprint now also works with fishing huts. Is that the one where it boosts the output of the nodes? I don't remember that one. Which one that one is? Added all these resources to the random embarkation goods. All the new stuff. Average amount of resources given to the player for salvaging units, salvaging ruins has been increased. Secured Trail Cornerstone is gone. I don't remember what one that one is. Change the order of some buildings in the build menu. Okay. World map generation values. They drastically reduce the number of Royal Woodlands tiles. It's still the dominant biome, but should appear only slightly more often than other biomes. Thank you. How many times, and especially in the more recent playthroughs, have I been like, I would like to have something else other than Royal Woodlands? And so the Cursed Royal Woodlands is the only one that is much, much more rare than the others. The rest of them are pretty much even, except for the Royal Woodlands having a slight bias now. So it might be like, 55%, or well, what is there, 4 biomes? So it might be like 20, 20, 20, like 5 for this one, and then whatever's left for the other one, or however the math works out. Don't check my math. The clay pit and greenhouse are now in the ruins pool. And basic and specific species-specific housing will not spawn in glades, with the exception of haunted versions. Small warehouse will not spawn in generic ruins. They changed the overexploitation cornerstone. Moving species houses no longer costs resources. Thank you. Drying boards increases the break time between breaks for villagers under the effect of coats. Buffed the clay pit. Less rainwater. Rain engines can now be installed in the clay pit, and the clay pit can now produce resin. That makes that a little bit better. A little bit better. Haunted Forest roadmap modifier can no longer spawn near the Forbidden Lands and the Dangerous Lands modifier. Okay. Rebalance some seal objectives. I won't read through those because I don't remember what those are that specifically anyway. New tier of difficulty for seal objectives. Titanium and adamantine seal now have slightly harder objectives compared to lower seals. Numerical change. Okay. Calling a trader immediately will now always reduce their arrival time to 30 seconds or less. UI UX improvements. There's a whole host of things here that I probably don't really need to read through. But late events are now a category in the encyclopedia, and they are locked until you do them once, though. Workers can be assigned to unfinished buildings. Those workers will immediately switch to being workers in the building after they finish building the building. So it's kind of nice to be able to allocate your future workers to be builders first on that specific building. Also, that helps you force a building to get done sooner, perhaps, rather than just setting the priority. Builders can take goods from storages in nearby buildings. Blight fighters can take goods from nearby storages. Farmers can build farm fields if there are unconstructed fields within the range of the farm they're assigned to. So once you assign them to work at a farm, and they build that farm building, they'll then go out and build the farm fields, which is really good. I like that idea. Let's see. There was one in this area that I liked, but I don't remember what it was. I thought, and on all the lightning ones, all the community influenced ones. Ignore diagonal trees and working glades within the ignore glades edge modifier. That might have been it. I don't really understand what that means, but maybe I can think about it and I'll come up with something. I'm kind of just leaving it on the screen here in case you would like to read through anything else. If there's anything that I don't highlight that you think is important enough that I should have, by all means let me know in the in the chat or not in the chat. There's no chat in this video. In a chat for another video, or in the comments section, or come to Discord and we can talk about it there, of course. I think that's the major ones to highlight though there. I'm not going to highlight any of the bug fixes because they're just, you know, edge case kind of bug fixes in the most case, but I'll kind of leave them on the screen for a moment and you could have paused to see that. The Kelpie Glade event will charm the villagers and they will go stand around it hypnotized, which is kind of interesting. And the visual appearance of some buildings have changed, so we're going to have to check out those new ones. I'm guessing they must have a frog-like appearance or a frog building appearance. New icons, new sound effects, and you can now change the menu skin in the game to match whichever of the skins, because there's a new skin here themed around this update, of course, and specifically the DLC, I believe, also. Okay, so that is patch 1.4. That's not any... All that stuff we talked about is in the patch that everyone gets. From this point forward, everything is in the DLC. The new species, frogs. They're a dignified and proud people with a unique affinity for wealth, renowned for their exceptional skills in architecture and their love of water. They seem to be the least bothered by rain and prefer not to live in ordinary shelters. Frogs are skilled masons and love working with rainwater. So here's the list of needs. Kind of can line those up with the list that we looked at for the other races, species. Frog housing is kind of a unique thing. Frogs can't live in shelters, and they don't have a need for basic housing. You have to build frog-specific housing, which is why frog-specific housing, I think it tells us here at some point, is or it told us in the cornerstone, or the upgrades tree changes for sure. Frog housing is an essential building from the moment you can unlock frogs. So that's kind of a different and change from everybody else who you have to unlock it in the upgrades tree. For frogs, you get it right away. Kind of nice, kind of different, interesting. Frog specializations are masonry, which is their proficiency, so that's the multiplicative or the extra production, and then rainwater comfort, that's the plus resolve. And frog firekeepers have the ability to increase the speed at which newcomers arrive by 50%. I'm not positive on the math on this until we actually get in there and see it, but I think that means that they'll come, instead of 10 minutes, they'll come in 7.5. I don't think that means, or no, they'll come in 6, whatever it is. I don't think that means they'll come in 5 minutes. I think it's longer than that, because I think it's an increase in speed by 50%. So I think it ends up being like 6 minutes and 40 seconds, actually, rather than like 5 minutes. But I'm not positive. We'll see when we get into the game. If we do a Frog Fire Keeper. Kind of a strategy on this might be to do the Frog Fire Keepers in the beginning of a town, or if you've lost a bunch of people due to whatever reason. Whereas later in other parts of the game, maybe you still want to use a fox or a lizard to kind of, mitigate some of the other things. But that's another strategy to keep in mind on the frogs. Frog houses have 4 upgrade levels instead of 2. I'm not going to highlight all of these here, but there are some unique perks in these. You can either choose to do room for villagers or storage for rainwater. You can choose to do bonus to resolve for the occupants, or you can choose to have faster production for the occupants. You can choose bonus to newcomer groups, or you can choose packs of building materials for free every year. And then you can choose bonus to resolve from this rain engine low strain bonus, which I'm not sure what that is. And then, or you can choose to have a workbench, which will boost building material recipes, double production. Their starting ability is locating one nearby ruin. So they're a good one to have if you happen to have a cornerstone, or a forest mystery that maybe requires you to, not an order that requires you to find ruins. They might be helpful in that case. They have these following attributes, which we'd have to look at the others to see how they compare. But medium resilience, demanding is 25, decadence is 5, hunger tolerance is 5. Frogs are unlocked at level 13, and so their houses are also unlocked at level 13. Coastal Grove is a new biome. It only spawns if you have the DLC, and only spawns if you can regenerate the world map. So I don't think I'm going to get it in my series to start with, but we can see. There might be a thing that I can make it happen. We'll have to see how that goes. I may have to choose a different save and stuff like that. We'll see. Because I have 3 or 4 saves. Coastal Grove is lands that have been underwater for a long time, and a dense forest of algae has grown over them. The seawater has blocked any viceroys that have tried to reach this area, so the nearby marshes are full of remnants of earlier settlements. You start on the edge of the map near the water. Oops, I highlighted the wrong thing. And your starting glade will contain a new unique building, the Strider Port, which you can see here on the theme here. There's the Strider Port and the Strider there. And then expeditions alternate between blueprint expeditions and treasure expeditions from the Strider Port. Blueprint expeditions will give you a blueprint and a treasure chest, while treasure expeditions only offer a treasure chest with higher chance of higher rarity. So you need to provide food for the Strider, either in fish or algae form, and for its rider, either a raw or cooked food. More supplies means higher chance for rarity of treasure chests. And you get fewer reputation blueprints in this biome than the others. It looks like it's 5 blueprints instead of the usual 8. Or instead of the usual number. No, there are 5 fewer blueprints, excuse me, but you can get 8 from expeditions, so that encourages you to do the expeditions in order to get those blueprint upgrades. But you can also possibly control the timing of them a little bit better. You can select the building category you're interested in before you send an expedition, and you'll get a blueprint in that category. That's super powerful. That's kind of like having one of the, smuggler's visit type of thing, or in the other one, except that you have to pick a category, and then you get a building in that category, rather than, say you want a camp. You can pick a category in the gathering buildings, maybe you'll get a camp or a farm, whereas if you want an industry building later, you can pick that category, etc. Each subsequent expedition will be a bit more expensive and time-consuming, which makes sense. You gotta make them harder as you go. Trees drop a chance of algae and vegetables, in addition to wood, presumably. And here's the resource selection in the Coastal Grove biome. One additional fact beside the Strider Port, Gift of the Depths. After using beta 150 times in your fishing huts, you will unlock the ability to sacrifice algae in the Asian hearth to reduce hostility. Ooh, that is powerful too. I like that. 4 new buildings in the DLC: the pantry, the cannery, the frog house, and the Strider port. We talked, or you can see the recipes in these 2 buildings here. Both are cooking buildings, it appears. And the frog house we already talked about. The Strider port we just talked about. But it is only available in that specific biome. You cannot get it in any of the other biomes, so keep that in mind. The Smoldering City, 2 new upgrades. These are the other 2 that we talked about earlier. House upgrades for the frogs and starting ability for the frogs to find that nearest ruin. New cornerstones and perks. Not going to read through those, but you can see them here on the screen. In addition to new orders, and these are all frog-themed, basically. New orders, all again kind of frog-themed or related. Lots of new orders. New Glade event, Fallen Frog Architects, similar to the Fallen Lizard Explorers and Beaver Explorers and Human Explorers, etc. Kind of the same kind of thing. New need for frog housing, excuse me. New deeds, all kind of frog related or Strider related, and new decorations as well. Comfort, aesthetics, and wait, isn't it yellow not aesthetics but something else? So I'm not sure if that's a yellow category or if that's miss whatever here. Maybe a flaw in the patch notes here. And then the default main menu skin shows the new biome. Of course, we looked at that already. And 14 new music tracks for the Coastal Grove biome. So all in all, a ridiculously large number of changes in this update. We've been waiting for this update for 2 or 3 months now, so it's a long time coming, but it's also a lot to get in this new version. So we're going to leave this video here, and in the next one, hope you will join me for the playthrough using both the new version and the DLC. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you then. Bye for now.